never seen.
Let us strive every moment of our lives to make ourselves better and better to the best of our ability.
Sometimes masquerading as the spider, thus concealing his identity from both criminals and the police.
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The shadow knows.
Was a briefly but wildly prolific pulp magazine fictioneer also a potential murderer? History regards Raoul Whitfield as a hard-boiled Dashiell Hammett wannabe and also ran. But decades after both crime novelists' deaths, their lives, personal lives really, remain fiendishly balled up, a tantalizing tangle highlighted by surviving correspondence and connect-the-dot biographical eyebrow raisers that practically spin their own wicked tale. Raoul Whitfield was a certified black mask boy, handsome, charismatic. Whitfield was also a Hammett acolyte, eventual friend, staunch advocate for the much less prolific Dash, and still more prodigious Hammett boozing partner. But even earlier, Whitfield was a fleeting silent film bit player, a World War I era pilot in the skies above France, and just possibly a wife killer. Raoul Whitfield's increasingly ebbing fame isn't helped by his comparatively brief, if wildly prolific stint publishing in a string of pulp magazines under his birth name as well as the florid pseudonyms of Ramon Decolta and Temple Field. If he remains much less known now than Hammett, Whitfield's bibliography is infinitely more robust than that of Sam Spade, Nick Charles' creator. Making the leap in 1930 to hardcover novelist, Whitfield attempted what Raymond Chandler and other pulp novelists would also do once they caught the attention of New York hardcover publishers and were required to produce novel-length works. Whitfield took several of his short stories already proven in the pulps and attempted to meld them into a larger, but ultimately uneven unified storyline. Whitfield's first such novel was titled The Green Ice. Set in 1930s industrial Pittsburgh, it depicts a place now far removed from PulpFest's host city. Quote, red flames streaked up into the sky from the plant stacks. Red smoke hung low. The air was heavy, thick with grime, unquote. Hammett declared in a blurb for The Green Ice, the plot does not matter. What matters here are 280 pages of naked action pounded into a tough compactness by staccato, hammer-like writing. In the space of a few years, Whitfield published several hardcover crime novels under his own and a pen name, as well as a series of juvenile reader anthologies for Knopf in hardcover. The latter were built around aeronautics, naval adventure, and circus life. Soon after this flurry of Depression-era books and short stories, Whitfield largely disappeared from the publishing world. In just a very few years, he was dead. Like his pen names, Whitfield's backstory is somewhat exotic. Born in New York in 1896, Raoul Falconia Whitfield, and later official documents, he mysteriously reported his middle name as Falconier, suggesting falconer, soon traveled to Asia. He grew up in the Philippines, settings and experiences fueling many stories about Manila-based Filipino detective Joe Gar. 24 Gar stories would appear in Black Mass between 1930 and 1933. The last story in the series, The Great Black, printed in the August 1937 edition of Cosmopolitan, is also the last known to be published by Whitfield in his lifetime. Most critics and readers regard the Joe Gar stories as representing Whitfield's high water mark as a fiction writer. Other lesser Whitfield characters include Mel Ornay, Gary Kells, Donald Free, Buck Kent, and Ben Jardin. A typical Gar short piece of knowing Manila scene setting goes. The Caleso, pulled by a sturdy horse, moved swiftly toward the bay. It was a dark night. There was no moon. A hot breeze blew in from the direction of the Cavite. The Luneta, flanked by the Manila Hotel and the Army and Navy Club, was behind now. The first fiction publication for Whitfield came in the 1920s in Street and Smith's sports stories. More followed in breezy and droll stories. In 1926, in addition to publishing an increasing number of other pulps, including battle stories and adventure, Whitfield sold 8 short stories to Black Mask, starting with Scotty Trouble's Trouble. In less than a decade, Whitfield placed nearly 100 stories with Black Mask, wildly dwarfing the output of either Hammett, Chandler, or virtually any other contributor to the venerable crime pulp. Black Mask covers herald stories by both Raoul Whitfield and Ramon de Colta. But Whitfield was never a prideful craftsman, nor a consistent prose stylist. He was a kind of writing machine when he sat down at the typewriter, and at his best, he tended to effectively cut to the chase, as in this telegraphic description of a newspaper account of a slaying. Angel Cerulli had been found in an alley behind his club with a flock of 38s in his stomach and chest. That wasn't a clue. He had many enemies. The rest of the story was just writing. Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine founder, Frederick Dene, described Whitfield's writing routine as recounted by Raoul's first and longest living wife. Raoul Whitfield always wrote very easily and quickly, and with a minimum of correction. He had a particular talent for starting with a title and writing around it. His wife has said that once he had a title, he had the story. He would place neat stacks of chocolate bars, which he ate by the thousands, to the right of his typewriter, and a picket fence of cigarettes to his left. He wrote and chain-smoked and ate, all in one unified operation. He could be surrounded by a cocktail party going on at full blast and keep right on writing. Apropos of cocktail parties in the high life, Whitfield did earn a major fan among the jazz-age literati. F. Scott Fitzgerald insisted to a critic author friend that Whitfield was as good as Hammett. Fitzgerald, some scholars and biographers think, also betted a Whitfield wife. That same wife would also make a run at novelist Thomas Wolfe. During most of his period of publishing successes, Raoul was married to Prudence Van Tyne Whitfield. Prudence is the first of 3 known wives and the only one not to die before Raoul as a result of suicide. Prudence was a partner Whitfield ultimately divorced and whom outlived Raoul for decades, always maintaining close ties with Hammett even well after Raoul's passing. Prudence and Raoul divorced in 1933. Like so much about the couple, together and as individuals and as apparent mutual fabulists, the underlying causes for the Whitfield split remain stubbornly mysterious. But surviving correspondence between Prudence and Hammett over a period of years fuel informed speculation of a likely love affair between the two, that illicit romance having possibly triggered the Prudence-Raoul separation. That said, Raoul also had a wandering eye, and it likely had already come to rest on his next wife. Regardless of who cheated on the other first, from the consummation of their divorce, Raoul's career and his life careened into a death spiral, one worthy of the sorts of aerial crash dives described in more than one Whitfield aviation-themed pulp thriller. Single again, Raoul Whitfield drifted to Los Angeles. There he undertook screenwriting, including an adaptation of one of his short stories, as well as reported script work on The Mask of Fu Manchu starring Boris Karloff. Whether Raoul realized it or not, his best years as a writer were behind him. With the ink hardly dry on either's divorce papers, Whitfield wed the previously twice-married Emily Davies Vanderbilt Thayer. Emily was attractive and hyper-literate. She was a book collector and frequent pretty face in Gertrude Stein's Paris salon, and was quite wealthy. The new Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield favored a Tex-Mex honeymoon. The pair went on to purchase the unpromisingly named Dead Horse Ranch, close by Las Vegas, New Mexico. If their all too apt choice of ranch names smacks of heavy-handed pulp foreshadowing, things indeed began to fall apart around the couple, and fast. Accounts indicate Whitfield, always an energetic elbow bender, was losing a long and escalating battle against alcoholism, much like the same wet-brain spiral that would truncate Hammett's writing career. In a dust jacket description for Raoul's doppelganger, Temple Field, it was asserted around the same time, Temple Field lives in New York City, likes to collect material in night outlets and speakeasies, and is young enough to enjoy writing every word he writes. But the once prolific Whitfield Field was in reality winding down as a writer, no longer the uncanny word machine he was when, for a time, he ranked as possibly the highest-paid pulp magazine scribe in his field. A contemporary newspaper account about Emily abruptly suing Raoul for divorce reports, "Last Christmas, the Whitfields sent their New York friends interesting photographs of their ranch and themselves in happy poses. So I assume whatever occurred to disrupt their peace and happiness took place in the last 7 or 8 weeks. Those last 7 or 8 weeks? They comprised a still mystery-clouded overture to the bloody end of the second Whitfield marriage. Emily was found dead from a gunshot wound on May 25, 1935. The night before her body was discovered, the San Francisco Examiner reported, "She sent for a ranch servant and said, 'I'm jittery tonight. Turn on the radio loud and mix me a strong highball.'" The Examiner account continues, "Next morning, when the same servant entered the ranch house, the radio was still crashing out jazz tunes. The highball glass was empty. Emily, the once pampered pet of New York society, was sprawled dead across her bed." The Daily Illini, drawing on Associated Press reports, described the crime scene, stating Emily was found in pajamas and a flowing robe. A revolver, it's usually referred to as a Colt, but its caliber varies across various newspaper accounts, though most do agree it had a longish to long barrel, was found in Emily's outflung right hand. Yet, there were powder burns and a fatal gunshot wound on Emily's left side. As another account puts the circumstances of her death, a hastily assembled coroner's jury ruled that a divorced despondent Emily took her own life. This conclusion was swiftly reached despite the obvious challenge posed for a right-handed woman who just downed a very potent cocktail to use a long-barreled revolver to fatally shoot herself through her left side. Emily left no note. The suspicious circumstances represented by the awkward mechanics of Emily's alleged suicide, and the fact that Raoul had not been written out of Emily's will at the time of her death, and so inherited everything, predictably fanned rumors of foul play. Raoul was thought to be in California at the time, but regardless, still more rumors circulated that Emily's death was at least a murder for hire, with Raoul the hinted-at instigator. But no revision of the coroner's jury ruling was ever made. No charges were ever filed against the suspected killer. Not long after, Raoul took still another trip down the aisle, this time with a much younger local barmaid and New Mexico native. Raoul's third wife, too, would soon reportedly take her own life. Whitfield wife number 3 was Lois Bell. She was 20-ish, probably already Whitfield's lover before Emily started divorce proceedings against Raoul. Most likely, Lois was the catalyst for Emily and Raoul's split. Newly flush with his second wife's inheritance, Raoul and Lois lived a high-tone life, heedlessly burning through his suspicious inheritance. But this romance, too, soured. Whitfield's health was also failing. Tuberculosis, the same disease dogging Dashiell Hammett, had come to take down the Black Mask boy. Lois Bell reportedly threw herself from a San Francisco window in another apparent Whitfield wife bid for suicide. The third Mrs. Whitfield eventually succumbed to her injuries, according to correspondence. Whitfield wrote Hammett, who in turn shared Whitfield's words with wife Lillian Hellman. These things are never easy. Hammett continues, Whitfield, writing me about the death by suicide of his second wife in succession, says, I feel pretty much lost. I don't seem to get over these things easily. You can have that for your scrapbook. Raoul Whitfield died January 24, 1945 at age 48. He's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. In conceiving my series character, Hector Lassiter, a black mask writer who turns hardcover novelist and eventual screenwriter, I drew on several real pulp-era authors, including Brett Halliday, Jonathan Latimer, and Whitfield. But my knowledge of Raoul's marital backstory was fully nil. I knew nothing then about his sordid personal life. Yet I wrote of Hector Lassiter, a New Mexico-based crime novelist, being a suspect in his own wife's suspicious suicide. Lassiter is famed for using his life as grist for his fiction, for writing what he lives and living what he writes. Flash forward to 2008. In Arizona, on a book tour, I picked up an intensely researched historical crime fiction novel by New Mexico-based author Walter Satterthwaite about Whitfield called Dead Horse. It was published in 2006 when my first Lassiter novel was moving toward 2007 publication. In an Arizona hotel room, I devoured at a sitting Mr. Satterthwaite's excellent novel describing how Whitfield could have killed his second wife and gotten away with it. The uncanny congruities with what I thought was my own invented fiction still chill me. Walter Satterthwaite died on February 26, 2020. I won't spoil his theory laid out in Dead Horse, establishing an all-too-possible explication of how Whitfield could have killed his second wife at Dead Horse Ranch near Las Vegas, New Mexico, while he was seemingly in the City of Angels. But suffice it to say, Satterthwaite's theory hinges on certain skills and abilities informing numerous Black Mask and other pulp magazine stories attributed to Raoul Whitfield or his pseudonymous alter egos. Call it life, darkly imitating pulp noir.
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit.